You guys playing the Elden Ring DLC? Well, I'm not. I've been too busy making this thing. Hey guys, welcome back. I love Elden Ring and I'm sure many of you do too. When they announced the collector's edition for the DLC and I took one look at that picture, I said, I need it! But then I saw the price tag and I knew that was not gonna happen. Luckily, there's an amazing artist who already made an STL version of it, so it gave me the opportunity to make it myself. Forgive the bad photo, but on the right is the size of the collector's edition statue and on the left is the size that I decided to print mine in. Now I'm not saying size matters, but mine's bigger. I didn't have too many references to go off, as when I started this project the game hadn't released yet. All I really had was a couple of shots from the trailers and the collector's edition statue itself. This thing is gorgeous even without paint, but it's so many pieces and has to be put together in a very precise order or else it just won't work. This is easily the most complicated statue I've ever had to build, and it's also the one that has the most pieces. I had to print this thing in 43 pieces. So let's finish printing them up so we can get started. I am so excited to play the DLC once I'm done editing this video. Can't believe it's been 2 years since I stepped foot in the lands between. Last week I decided to make a little challenge for myself to make sure my skills were sharp for the DLC. I made a new character to see if I could beat the Tree Sentinel right out the gate. I thought it would be a good way to get back into the swing of things. But I am a FromSoft veteran, so I didn't think it was gonna be too hard.
Come on, you bastard. Oh, son of a mother!
We'll get back to that in a bit, but with all the parts printed and ready, let's get to work. Just like every other project, it takes a lot of prep work to get things ready for painting. That usually comes in the form of sanding down nub marks or layer lines and using clay to fix gaps or other issues. This usually takes hours, sometimes even days, depending on how much time I have to work on it, and especially in this case with this model having 43 pieces, it definitely took a lot longer than usual. Sometimes I spend so much time sanding that my fingers start going numb. I don't know if that's normal or not, I should probably get that checked out. But anyway, the more time you spend searching through your models for issues to fix and sanding them to perfection, the easier of a time you're gonna have when it comes to painting it. So just be mentally and physically prepared to be at it for a while and know that you're gonna be covered in resin dust by the end. Which is why this part of the project is usually what takes the longest and fills me with the most sorrow. And speaking of sorrow...
Oh. What? Okay, explain to me how the fuck—
While I continue to bark up that tree, Sentinel, let's get back to work. With only a handful of references to go by, this artist did an incredible job at recreating the statue. However, there are a few things that are inaccurate to Messmer from the game. The first thing I noticed is the fact that in the game he's wearing these greaves, sandals? Let's go with sandals. Although From Software does love them some feet, so I guess they'd probably prefer it that way. The next thing I noticed was the sigil missing from his cape. This one I tried to fix myself, but I couldn't quite figure out how to get it on there cleanly. Before I could even try it, I had to redraw the entire thing since the only image we have of it is pretty low quality. I messed around with it for a little bit, but I guess I'm just not knowledgeable enough in Nomad Sculpt to get this done correctly. After about an hour of trial and error, I decided to just scrap that idea. Another difference I noticed was that in the trailers I've seen, Messmer seems to only have one eye. I turned to the collector's edition to clear this up, but they didn't bother giving him any eyes at all, so that wasn't much help. It could just be a coincidence that in every promo image he just happens to have his left eye closed, but considering there are so many characters in Elden Ring who have only one eye, I thought it was deliberate. So I took his head into Nomad Sculpt and did a quick little adjustment to close his left eye. It's not perfect, but it'll do. I just hope it's accurate to the game. And the final thing I felt this statue needed was some flames. In every trailer, he's very much associated with fire. We hear about Messmer's flame and see him spew fire everywhere, so I'm not sure why the collector's edition statue didn't give him any. So let's change that. Let's give Messmer his flames. I repurposed these fire effects from another statue I made recently that you guys will get to see real soon. They fit perfectly and add more depth to the piece. It also helps me feel like I'm improving upon the collector's edition instead of just ripping it off. Speaking of ripping off, that Tree Sentinel challenge really made me want to rip my hair out.
No, are you, oh no, there's no, That's what From Software does, right? They give you hope and then they take it away from you.
And as I continue to have that nervous breakdown, I've got all the parts prepped, so let's start painting. As always, the first step is to give everything a coat of primer. Considering there are 43 pieces to this statue, this took quite some time to get done. I actually didn't have enough of these sticks to hold all the pieces, so I had to do the painting in shifts. But once everything was primed gray, now I have to paint most of it black. Black is the first step in the technique known as zenithal highlighting, where you first paint or prime the model black and then spray with white from the top to form contrasting shadows. Now you may be wondering why I didn't just use a black primer instead of the gray to skip that last step. The reason is that when you use a black primer, sometimes there are tiny scratches or holes that you won't be able to notice since the model is too dark. Priming it gray first lets me make sure that the model doesn't have any of these little defects before I start putting actual paint on it. With all the black painted, now we can add the next step of the zenithal highlight for the parts that need it, mainly the capes. Creating that contrast for the shadows now is important for the next step, which is painting the red with Citadel contrast paints. These paints are somewhat transparent and allow the shadows from the zenithal highlight to remain visible underneath. This is my first time actually using these Citadel contrast paints, and I gotta say, the results are beautiful, man. I really love these. I'm gonna have to use more of these in the future. The rest of the painting process is pretty straightforward, so there's not much I can say that you haven't heard a bunch of times already. Despite being so many pieces, this model was actually a lot of fun to paint. Since everything was separated so well, I barely had to mask anything off with tape or silly putty. I also got to do a lot of dry brushing, which is always fun. I even tried something a bit new with this project and decided his skin should be stippled on with a sponge, which is why I brought the ice cream cone. Now his skin tone was another point of contention on this project for me, and most of the art I've seen, his skin seems to have no color. Even the collector statue has gray skin, so I figured the safest bet was to go with gray. Now this may or may not be accurate to his skin in the game, but if you want to be mad at somebody, blame Bandai. They're the ones who made the official collector's item have the same skin tone as mine. Or you can blame From Software themselves for putting that stupid tree sentinel right in the beginning of the game.
No, you again? You just cheat. Alright. Okay. You know what? No, I'm not mad. That's my fault. I'm supposed to be editing the video right now. Why did I think this was a good idea?
What's left of the painting process is just basically repeating everything we've seen so far across all the parts. He's supposed to be really old and his armor looks extremely used and battle worn, so almost everything gets a pretty heavy black wash as well. I'll then come back with a dry brush and bring those edge highlights back in. I made sure I really gunked up that black wash on these parts to make sure that it sold the look of it being really old. I used the same method for his hair, but in the process I ended up getting some red on his face that I had to touch up with the sponge. However, the sponge already had dry paint on it, so when I tried to use it, it made the skin all blotchy and ugly. Luckily, I'm really good at being bad. I already anticipated that I'd break or mess up the head, which is why I printed a spare. In just a few minutes, I've already got a new head painted up. Now, I don't know if that means I'm such a genius that I'm always thinking ahead. Or if it means I screw up so much that I have to print spare parts all the time. I'm gonna choose to go with the first option. And with the final details being applied, that's bringing us close to the end. I've been dying to paint this guy ever since I printed him a few weeks ago. And I gotta say, I'm not disappointed in how he turned out. The painting process was pretty flawless, I just wish the assembly was as easy. All the issues I had with this project were right at the end. As I mentioned before, this thing is like a puzzle, it has to be built in a very specific order. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of gluing the legs on too soon and I couldn't wrap the snake around it, so I ended up having to break the leg off just to correct it and then glue it back on. In the end though, I did manage to get everything on there somewhat effectively. A few parts didn't get glued in the exact position they should have, but I'll take what I can get. I mean, it's a miracle I even got him to stand on his own. He's so top heavy with such skinny legs that the first time I tried to stand him up, his ankle snapped. I ended up having to add some extra clay for support around his other foot and the spear just to get him standing upright on his own. But other than some minor damage that you probably can't see unless you really look for it, I think it turned out pretty good. I'd like to take this moment before we wrap up to say I appreciate anyone who stuck around this far to watch. I've got some more Elden Ring stuff coming in the future, as well as more anime, video game, and movie stuff too. If you like what I do, consider subscribing and liking the video, it helps me out a ton. And before we take a closer look at Messmer the Impaler, let's see how that Tree Sentinel challenge ended, shall we?
Now we're both one hit. Not today, bitch. That wasn't so bad. I'm definitely ready for Shadow of the Erdtree now. That only took me, what, like 5-6 tries, I think? Wasn't so bad. Quick in and out. Shadow of the Erdtree. More like Shadow of my massive ball.